If you are covered in dust, does the mirror cease to exist, or merely lose its clarity? This paradox captures the essence of Ibn Arabi's teaching about consciousness and perception. The human being, he argued, is not the dust knot, the ego, emotion, or identity that clings to awareness, but the mirror itself, the reflective capacity through which reality becomes visible. Ibn Arabi described the cosmos as a mirror in which the divine contemplates itself. Among all created forms, the human being is the most polished of these mirrors, capable of conscious reflection. Modern cognitive science arrives at a similar idea through a different path. Perception, according to neuroscientist Anil Sethza, is not passive reception but a controlled hallucination, the brain's attempt to model external reality by projecting patterns of expectation. We do not see the world as it is. We see the world as our mind reflects it. The question, then, is not whether we are reflecting, but what clouds that reflection, and how it can be polished to reveal the real behind appearances in modern life. The mirror of awareness is constantly fogged by stimulation and self-reference. From a psychological standpoint, the human mind evolved with a negativity bias, a tendency to notice threat more than truth. This bias once ensured survival. Today, it distorts perception. Attention gravitates toward criticism, competition, and insecurity. Digital culture intensifies this distortion. Social media trains consciousness to view itself through external reflection. How one is seen replaces what one actually sees. This constant self-monitoring produces a feedback loop. Identity becomes performance, and perception becomes reaction. This state maps to overactivity in the default mode network, a brain's hub for self-referential thinking. When this network dominates, attention collapses inward. We begin to experience reality not as mirror clarity, but as narrative distortion. The consequence is existential confusion. The self begins to identify with the dustral's reactions, emotional residues, and forgets its function as mirror. Ibn Arabi's philosophy offers a rational framework for rebalancing this condition. The aim is not to suppress individuality, but to purify perception, allowing consciousness to reflect reality instead of projecting illusion. Ibn Arabi, known as Al-Sheikh al-Akbar, developed one of the most systematic philosophies of perception in world history. In his works he articulated the concept of tajalli, divine existence, he argued, is not a separate creation but the mirror through which God knows himself. The cosmos, therefore, is not merely an object of divine creation but an act of divine recognition. Humanity, as Al-Insan al-Kakmil, the complete human, is the most perfect reflective surface of consciousness, capable of witnessing the real dot. This idea parallels phenomenology in modern philosophy, where thinkers like Husserl describe consciousness as an act of intentional reflection that gives the world meaning. Cognitive psychology also aligns with this view. Perception is constructive, not receptive. The mind does not record reality. It reconstructs it through reflective modeling. But Ibn Arabi takes this model further. He identifies specific layers of distortion, the dust that obscure the mirror's surface and prevent true reflection. The first layer is the dust of ego, identification with the reflection. The ego is the illusion that the reflection is the source. When the mirror forgets that light comes from beyond it, it begins to believe it produces its own image. This is the human tendency to mistake personal thought for objective truth. Modern neuroscience describes this through the self-referential bias. The brain's default mode network sustains the inner monologue of I, me, and mine. Every experience becomes evaluated through the filter of identity. What does this mean for me? This leads to defensive reactions. In conversation, disagreement is perceived as threat. The mind defends the image rather than investigates the truth. When the mirror believes it owns the image, it distorts reflection. Awareness must detach from identification and remember that perception arises through it, not from it. The second layer is the dust of habit, the mind's tendency to automate awareness. Ibn Arabi warns that habitual seeing blinds the intellect. What is seen constantly becomes invisible. The modern brain exemplifies this through perceptual habituation neural efficiency that filters out repetitive stimuli to save energy. When driving home on a familiar route, one may arrive without remembering the journey. Awareness was not absent. It was asleep in daily life. Habit renders reality background noise. Beauty, wonder, and subtlety vanish into routine. The world becomes a predictable construct rather than a living disclosure. To polish this layer, awareness must be renewed through deliberate attention. Modern mindfulness research supports this. Sustained attention strengthens neural connectivity and reopens perceptual vividness. Habit dulls perception. Curiosity restores it. The third layer is the dust of emotion, distortion through reaction. Ibn Arabi distinguishes between the heart as perceiver and the emotional turbulence that distorts it. When emotion dominates, reflection becomes warped. From a neuroscientific standpoint, intense emotion activates the amygdala, suppressing prefrontal regulation. The mind narrows its field of view, a mechanism useful for survival but disastrous for insight. This results in emotional reasoning, interpreting reality through feeling rather than evidence. Anger, fear, or attachment tint every reflection with their color. Emotional regulation is not repression but polishing, restoring reflective neutrality. Modern cognitive therapies show that labeling emotion reduces its intensity and reopens cognitive flexibility. The heart perceives truth when calm, not when turbulent. Emotional clarity is perceptual clarity. The fourth and most subtle layer is the dust of concept, confusing knowledge with seeing. Ibn Arabi warns that intellectual certainty can become a thicker veil than ignorance. To know about a thing is not the same as to see it. Knowledge that is not experiential becomes an additional layer of dust words, replacing reality in modern psychology. This is called semantic saturation. Repeated verbal association drains meaning from experience. Reading about compassion differs profoundly from perceiving compassion in action. Conceptual mediation can obscure direct experience. The mind believes the description is the event. True knowledge is not possession of information, but participation in presence. The mirror reflects light. It does not capture it. Ibn Arabi's metaphysics culminates in a paradox. The reflection is both real and unreal, real as manifestation, unreal as independent being. The mirror reveals an image that undeniably exists as appearance, yet it has no existence apart from the light it reflects. This parallels Kant's distinction between phenomenon and noumenon. The appearance is not false. It is conditioned truth, reality filtered through perception. Ibn Arabi refines this logic. Existence belongs only to the real. All forms are reflections of that being, each accurate within its capacity. Modern cognitive models, such as Donald Hoffman's interface theory, support this. Perception functions like a user interface, presenting symbolic representations suited for survival, not objective reality. Thus, the task is not to reject perception, but to purify its function, to recognize its transparency rather than mistake it for solidity. When the mirror is clear, duality dissolves. The perceiver, the reflection, and the light are understood as one continuum of being. Ibn Arabi's philosophy prescribes a method of purification grounded in disciplined awareness. Practice 1. Self-observation without judgment. Observe thoughts and emotions as reflections, not identity. Research shows that observing mental content from a neutral stance reduces emotional reactivity and enhances insight. This practice trains consciousness to see activity within the mirror rather than as the mirror. Practice 2. Attentional renewal. Re-engage perception with deliberate novelty. Focused attention strengthens perceptual networks. Walk familiar paths as if for the first time. Question habitual interpretations. Renewed attention dissolves the dust of habit. Practice 3. Emotional regulation as clarity. Recognize emotions as transient energy, not permanent truth. Rethinking events through alternative framing restores reflective balance. When emotion becomes information rather than identification, the heart regains its neutrality. Practice 4. Intellectual humility. Suspend conceptual certainty to allow direct perception. Studies show it reduces confirmation bias and promotes learning. For Ibn Arabi, humility is not moral modesty but epistemic precision, acknowledging the limit of conceptual thought before the infinitude of being. The process of polishing is both cognitive and ethical. Clear perception corresponds to sincerity of intention. Inner honesty cleans the mirror more effectively than effort. You are not the dust that gathers upon perception the emotions, roles, or narratives that cloud awareness, but the mirror itself, capable of reflecting infinite reality. The real never withdraws. Only perception becomes opaque. Modern science affirms this structure. Awareness filters sensory data, constructs predictive models, and mirrors its own assumptions. Clarity in those filters determines the accuracy of experience. The task is not to accumulate more data about reality, but to remove what distorts reflection. Enlightenment, in Ibn Arabi's logic, is a subtraction, not an addition, the removal of dust, not the acquisition of brightness. To know truth is not to gather new images, but to eliminate the distortions that obscure what is already shining. When the mirror forgets the dust and remembers its nature, the world reveals itself not as something seen, but as the seeing itself.